Makes my life a lot easier. It is such an incredible honor to be here in this room. I don't know if you guys feel it, but I feel serious vibes. All the energy of all the people that have played here, it's quite overwhelming. It's really an amazing experience to sort of walk in my father's footsteps, which was a huge part of the way that I wrote this book. I spent about 2 years traveling and talking to his friends and spending as much time as I could with my family and going to the places that he loved and lived in. And this was definitely one of the most powerful stops on my journey. And I'm going to read you a little bit of what came out of my conversation with Mr. Hall when I came here. And I'm also going to start reading a little bit from the introduction, which kind of just gives you a sense of what drew me to the project. I was raised without my father. He died when I was 2. And right before my 40th birthday, I realized that I really wanted to know more, and that it hadn't sort of happened naturally over the course of my life, that I would have to sort of pursue it and be more determined and have a sort of, having a project to take with me along that process made it kind of feel safer. And writing was sort of my dream. It was something that I'd wanted to do since I was little. And when you have a story like this, when you're born into a story this wonderful, it's sort of it's a gift, and you feel like you have to honor it. And I waited a long time to feel strong enough to do that and mature enough to handle what I knew would come, because there's so much goodwill for my father in the world already. I knew that I would have people curious about it right away, which for a new writer is, a wonderful thing. So it was a long road for me, but it was actually life-changing to meet people who love my father and who told such passionate stories. And I have to say, out of everyone I met, Rick was one of the people that was the most passionate and the most fun to talk to, and had the story just right there for me, and was really generous with it. So it'll be fun to read that to you. But first I'm going to read from the introduction. Chicago Auditorium Theater, 1974. Beyond the circles of light cast over the band's waiting instruments, I felt the vast, moving crowd in the darkness. My mother stood at the edge of the stage, holding me on her hip, my head resting on her shoulder. I was 4 years old. My Uncle Greg walked up to us, his long blonde hair tucked behind one ear, smiling at me with heavy-lidded eyes. He wore a white suit, rings on his fingers, and a silver ankh around his neck. He smelled of warm cologne and cigarettes and looked as clean and pretty as a doll. He lifted me out of my mother's arms and walked a few steps into the white light. I remember the whistling cheer that washed over the stage like a wave when the audience saw him. Little flames from lighters raised in outstretched hands shone like distant boats on a night sea. Greg spoke into a microphone at center stage, holding me curled against him, my face hidden in his neck. His low, whiskey voice called out, "This is my brother's little girl, and he lives on through her." He lifted me out into the darkness, and the whistles turned into a roar. My father is killed in the first paragraph of every article ever written about him. His life story is told backward, always beginning in the end, in the road, his motorcycle down, his body broken. People linger over the wreckage as if it says something meaningful about his life. Duane is most often described as a rock star, although he didn't live long enough to know how famous he would become. His brief, brilliant life has become mythic, a cautionary tale and a cliché, live fast, die young. But Duane Allman's story is more than a tragedy. It's a true romance. He fell in love with his guitar and gave his heart away. At 15 years old, he often stayed up all night, bent over on the couch, his fingers wandering the frets of his guitar in the dark. His mother would come home late from the restaurant where she worked and find him playing with reddened fingertips and a crick in his neck, deaf to the sound of the front door. She'd go to sleep and wake up in the morning to find him in the exact posture he'd been in the night before, still playing. And when she asked him what he was doing, pushing himself so hard, he said, "Mama, I'm searching for my sound. I'd go hungry to play this guitar." The sound he found helped change the way the world perceived the South. White Southern boys were most known for backward thinking and racist cruelty. My father's guitar sang out idealistic, astounding music that tipped that notion over. The Allman Brothers band made every Southerner with a radio proud of himself. Their music described a world of tough towns and darkened woods, men laughing down the length of beer-soaked bars or sitting alone in their rooms waiting by their telephones. You can hear them yearning in their songs and growling out their defiance, refusing to be chained. The Allman Brothers took the blues, the root of all American music, and electrified it in a way no American band ever had, with an integrated band in the segregated South. It was revolutionary. Duane played guitar so beautifully the world came to him. Eric Clapton, Aretha Franklin, Wilson Pickett, King Curtis, Boz Scaggs. Famous recording artists sought out this young man to record at Fame Studios and Muscle Shoals Sound in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, Atlantic Records in New York, and Criteria Studios in Miami. His remarkable talent brought him the opportunity to build a band of his own, and he formed a group of players that matched his skill and his commitment to playing note for note. They raised the bar for one another, each honing his skill against the other like blade against stone. The powerful chemistry between the brothers came together so fast it seemed magical and destined. The Allman Brothers Band became known for epic live performances, 6 men synced up and improvising in the jazz style, and no 2 shows were ever the same. Success came to them very quickly. Inside of 3 years, a private jet replaced their tour bus, which had replaced the Winnebago in their first Econoline van. Dive bars and public parks where they played for free overflowed into beautiful old theaters until stadiums were packed with thousands of fans. They built their following, playing hundreds of shows from the Fillmore in San Francisco to the Fillmore East in New York City. They called traveling from one coast to the other their commute, no joke. Drugs, decadence, and a growing darkness came along, tucked into their pockets. The Allman Brothers Band was the #1 band in America in 1972, and by then my father was gone. So that's the story in a brief moment. And I'm going to jump ahead to the time he spent in Muscle Shoals. And I wanted to say before I start reading it that this was really a pivotal moment in his life. And it's almost, it's almost the halfway point of my book. But his life really changed here. And he refocused his intention to be a serious musician here. And he came to this quiet, beautiful place right out of LA, which had been a really depressing, hard experience for him. They'd spent almost 2 years there. And he left his brother behind there, and he took on a new perspective, which was that he was going to try by hook or by crook to work here and to get a job in the studio and to become a session player. He wanted a stable life. He wanted to kick drugs. He wanted to renew his commitment to playing and figure out what he was going to do next. And it really served as a remarkable experience that raised his skill set, got him in front of some of the most important people on the business side of the industry, let him stand toe-to-toe with some of the world's greatest players, and the music he made in this room became the calling card that got him the attention, that essentially got him the opportunity to form his band. So it was a very important moment here. And when he wasn't in the studio, he was on the bank of the Tennessee River alone with his slide and his acoustic guitar, trying to perfect his technique, which he'd only just begun when he was in Los Angeles. He had seen Jesse Ed Davis play in Taj Mahal's band, and he just became fascinated. So he was fairly new at that process. He'd probably been playing for less than a year, and this is where he really had the time and the calm to really dig in. So everything that he brought to the Allman Brothers in some ways really came to fruition in this building and in this town. And my mother always likes to remind me that I was also conceived here in his cabin by the lake. She came and visited him for a month. And so I got my beginnings here too, which is fairly wonderful. So the very cool thing that my mom also gave me was she gave me the love letters that my father wrote her. And they are truly a remarkable kind of window into his mind. And some of them are on Fame stationery and the Downtowner stationery and different hotels that they visited. And so they're pretty great at capturing his voice and really showing, his thoughtfulness and also showing his perspective at the time. So I'm going to read a few of those, and then I'll read the story of him coming to fame. Duane sent letters to Donna sharing the changes he was going through. He wrote to her about the Hourglass breakup and his trip to Jacksonville. He told her he was running out of money and made a decision to return to Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals. He was determined to convince the owner, Rick Hall, to hire him as a session player. Duane knew he needed to get his head together. He needed to cut out the speed, let go of the bullshit big city scene, play some real music, and make a regular paycheck. He wrote to Donna steadily through the fall into the gray winter. September 4th, 1968, Daytona Beach, Florida. Skinny girl, I miss you. The band broke up. That is, we got rid of Paul and the duck. We tried to get the duck to stay, but he wouldn't have it without Paul. Paul's in Tuscaloosa gigging and the duck's in Miami in a studio. Greg, Pete, and I are still together. We hope to get this really cookin' spade drummer to start over with. It'll take a while, but it'll work better than the old group, I think. We've all been writing the new material, and some of it's really good. My writing is pretty stoned today. I really miss you, and I miss my tree a lot. I wish I was in it right now. On the way home, the damn bus broke down. It hung us up in Birmingham for 2 days. Interesting, huh? Nothing at all is happening here. We're all wanting to get back to St. Louis. Sorry I haven't written before now, but I've been on a gigantic bummer and couldn't write. Tell Jan, Joe, Bill, Eddie, and Drummer hello, and tell them about the group. It's hard for me to put thought to paper, and I haven't had the money to call, or I would, but I love you and I think of you often. Behave and I'll see you when I get there, I hope. November 10th, 1968, Florence, Alabama. Dear Skinny, I love you. This has been a rather slow week here. There were only 2 sessions, and I'm doing another Sunday. We start on Arthur Connolly's new record on Monday. I sure wish you were here. As soon as the money starts arriving from New York, I'll send you some to come here on. There's nothing in this place or any place I need more than you. Tell Doris I love her. Tell Joey and Jan to just go for themselves and eliminate Bill. One person doesn't make or break a band, he just gets fired. Fuck him. There's not much more here, so I guess I'll close out now. I've been smoking the outrageous killer weed today, and I'm really sleepy. Take care of yourself and think of me a little, because I'm thinking of you. Good night, love, Duane. And I love this one. This letter is dated last Wednesday, this year. Dear Donna, I heard you called my house to talk to me, but I wasn't home, so I figured I'd write you back instead of calling. We're pretty short on bread nowadays. I wish I'd been home because I've wanted to talk to you a lot of times, but somehow I never did get to call. I've missed you, and sometimes I've felt that you were thinking about me too, but I don't guess you can ever be sure about those feelings that you have, ever. I've been pretty busy lately. I cut Wilson Pickett's forthcoming album 2 weeks ago, and it went really well. Since then, I've been doing regular session work, playing guitar on other people's records when they don't play or can't play well enough. At the recording studio in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and it looks like I'm going to have to move up there soon. If I do, there's a good chance I'll be able to cut an album of my own. Greg is going back to California in 2 weeks to fulfill his obligation to Liberty Records, too. Did The Truth ever get their album out? If so, I'd sure like to have one. See if Joey can send one to me. Also, if you see him and Jan, tell him I'm doing Mike Bloomfield's new album with him. And also that I'm on Super Jam Volume 2 album with Hendrix, Bloomfield, Harvey Brooks, and Barry Goldberg. They'll probably dig that. I did some bottleneck things over some of Bloomfield's things that were pretty nice, if I do say so. They've been having these huge gatherings of freaks in Jacksonville, Florida every Sunday for the past few weeks. Millions of bands play and it's really fun. I wish you could be here to dig it. It's so great all around. The cops that go to them really dig it, so it's really great all around. I've been living there for quite a while with friends, and I'll probably stay there until I move to Muscle Shoals. Didn't I tell you that Jeff Beck would be a monster? He's so fine. I'm glad he's really making it. I hope you get the chance to see him in St. Louis if you haven't already. I really miss being in St. Louis. I love it there. I miss the boats, the tree, and the bears more than anything. What's this crap about me getting killed by a train or something? Hearing things like that is really weird. I know that it's probably hard for you to write letters because it is for me too, but I want you to try because I need to hear from you soon. Take care of yourself and those around you, and think of me once in a while because in my heart I love you very much, and I think of you often. I'll write more later, D. Their correspondence was their courtship. Opening the glass lid of her keepsake box is like opening a time capsule. Each letter has the softened hand of a loved thing, paper folded and refolded so many times they've gone limp. My father's handwriting is neat and even, and his voice startles me how clearly it reveals him. I don't know if my mother would have been able to hang on to the love my father felt for her without them. On my trip to Alabama, Johnny Sandlin drove me to Muscle Shoals to visit Fame, Florence, Alabama Music Enterprises, the legendary recording studio where my father's life really started to change. We passed through the marshy flatland that mirrored the vast sky above, fenced cotton fields and neatly groomed farmland, brick churches every other mile, and a smattering of small houses rested quietly beside the two-lane road. Picturing Duane in this rural, peaceful place after the constant action of Los Angeles wasn't easy. I figured you'd better know how to make your own fun if you moved to Muscle Shoals. Fame Studios is located in the same building it was in 1968. Walking inside, you hear the voices of Etta James or Clarence Carter singing through the little speakers above the door as a stream of hits plays all day. Fame has 2 studios, A and B, each room partially paneled in wood with high angled ceilings, acoustic tiles, and curtains to buffer sound. Control rooms are visible through large panes of glass. Rick Hall's office is upstairs. Now I've got to read what you said to me in front of you. That's fun. Okay. When I was much younger, Hall tells me when we meet, I was hot as a pistol. I had no time for Duane. I had no time for anybody. I was that guy in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. I cut the first hit record here. It was all black music. It was Arthur Alexander. That was the first one. Then Jimmy Hughes Steal Away, Joe Tex, Joe Simon, Aretha Franklin, Etta James, Wilson Pickett, Clarence Carter, and Otis Redding. Anybody who was anybody, they were here. Duane had separated from his brother. He considered his brother to be very talented, but someone you couldn't deal with. He was tough and he didn't understand business. He was a kid. Duane from the first was my guy and I was his guy. We loved each other. We cared about each other. He came here and said, I want to become a studio guitar player. My ankles bled most of the time because he was nipping at them. I'd think, come on, back off, don't breathe on me. And then he'd hug my neck and I'd hug his. I really cared for him. Rick settled back behind his wide desk and jumped right in at the beginning. Duane, I have 6 guitar players. The last thing I need is a guitar player. I've got guitar players running out my ears. I don't have a place for you. Would you mind if I just stayed around and kind of worked my way in somewhere? I'll set up a pup tent in the parking lot. I want you to use me on something. Make yourself at home, I said. I'm going to burn some ass, you'll see. Duane shook my hand and winked at me. Duane loved Clarence Carter, and when he heard he was coming up, he turned up the heat, and Rick told him he could play on the session. They cut a real blues thing called Road of Love, and Duane's playing really shined. Rick was impressed. In the middle of the song, Carter even sang out, I like what I'm listening to right now, after Duane's slide solo, a blast of passion in the middle of a simple, funky groove. Duane brought the track to life. He said, the blues are coming back, Rick. It's going to be big, and you can be big with it. I'm tired of that shit, Rick said. He was a rhythm and blues innovator. Horns, funky piano, and the all-important singer out front, bursting with personality to really put a song across. Duane was from another planet, walking in with tight striped pants and bowling shoes, his hair down to his shoulders, looking like it had never met a brush. He played so loud the shingles on the building rattled. Rick would say, you're killing me, I'm going deaf. And Duane would say, but that's it, Rick, the strings are wider when you play loud. It overrides the speakers in the amplifier and gives you that growl. Duane's talent was undeniable, and the artists who came through and the guys in the rhythm section respected his ability and enthusiasm right away. Rick signed Duane to a contract, but to Rick's mind, Duane's solo project was a mess. Duane wanted to sing, play guitar, and do everything on his own, but he didn't seem to be getting anything accomplished. He bedded down in Studio B, and he'd sleep half the day, and smoke pot in the alley for the other half. They were in a dry county, for God's sake. Even alcohol was forbidden, and he's lighting up without a care in the world. Duane convinced Rick to do 7 or 8 sides of him singing. Some weren't quite finished when Rick's close friend Phil Walden came by to check it out. Phil had been Otis Redding's manager from the beginning of his career, when Otis was still playing at high school dances in their shared hometown of Macon, Georgia. Phil was a self-made industry man, a kingpin in Macon who signed promising black artists and worked hard to help them across the color divide. Phil managed musicians and brought them to Rick to record. He and Rick shared a sense of themselves as modern Southern aristocrats, and they had found incredible success. Phil saw Duane's value right away. A white kid who could bring Southern music into the rock scene, he was a dream come true. Rick, you're going to be rich, Phil told him. You just got to hang in there. Just go in the studio, light up a cigarette, get you a Coca-Cola, turn the machine on, and sit back. And when he gets ready to do something, let him do it, and don't worry about it. Well, Rick was not built that way. He lived an orderly life and ran an orderly studio. His sessions ran like a well-oiled machine. The rhythm section came in day after day and worked regular hours. They knew those rooms intimately and how to get the best sounds out of them, and they wasted no time fussing with any of it. Then here's this skinny dude curled up on the floor taking a nap in the afternoon. Rick would wake Duane up and Duane would say, the stars aren't lining up. Twiggs Linden was one of the first people Phil Walden introduced to Duane. The buzz about the white guitar player who could really play the blues had reached Twiggs in Macon, and he traveled to Fame to check him out. Twiggs was a musical purist, raised on the real shit, and he had no interest in rock and roll. He truly believed black musicians were tapped into a source white players could never find. Twiggs was a tenacious and brilliant guy who had worked as a road manager for several of Walden's artists. He was born and raised in Macon, although he was cut from a different cloth than most of Macon's upright citizens. He walked with the swagger of a cowboy and dressed the part too. He wore a cowboy hat and a long ponytail, a holstered pistol on his belt. He tucked his blue jeans into knee-high boots, and to top it off, raced through town in a beautiful 1929 Ford Opera Coupe, which he treasured. He had bright blue eyes and great white teeth that flashed in a winning smile. He could talk his way into or out of almost any situation. Little Richard gave him his first job in the music business when he was not long out of high school and had gone AWOL from the Navy. Twiggs met the legendary R&B powerhouse at a club in California and told him they were from the same hometown. Twiggs offered his services to Little Richard for whatever he needed doing. The story goes that Little Richard gave Twiggs a suitcase full of money and told him to bring it back the next night, and when he did without a single bill touched, he was hired on the spot. Duane flat blew Twiggs' mind. He almost didn't have the words for the way Duane's playing made him feel. In his experience, no white musician he had ever heard was able to play the soulful feeling that Duane conjured. He said that the first 10 minutes he spent in Studio B at Fame hearing Duane jam made all the bullshit he had been through in the music business thus far well worth it. He made up his mind right then and there that Duane was his way forward. Just hearing him play would be payment enough for whatever Duane's band would need. Rick let Duane play with Wilson Pickett. Rick and Pickett had listened to a bunch of songs, demos from 16 writers out of Memphis and more in Alabama, but they still didn't have that one song that felt like a hit. Pickett was brutal with songs, Rick explained. He'd reject them and was apt to throw the guy who wrote it out and whip his ass. That's why we called him the Wicked Pickett. But he loved me, and he liked Duane. It was Duane's idea that Pickett record Hey Jude. Would you stop that? That's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. That record is number 5 this week with a bullet. It'll be number 1 in 2 weeks, and we will be there, and it will be there for 8 weeks. And we're going to cover the Beatles with Wilson Pickett in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Rick fairly shouted. That's exactly why we need to do it, Duane said. We are going to let the world know we're not afraid to produce anything on anybody. We'll cover it, and it's going to be a big hit. Pickett and Rick laughed and told him he was crazy. But then he started to play the riff, and it seemed like a different groove. Pickett warmed up to it, and Rick motioned for him to sing along. He sang Hey Jude, and Rick said, It's Jude, it's a name. On Hey Jude, Duane sounds like he's being released. Clearly excited by the energy radiating from Wilson Pickett, Duane sat on a small amp facing him, and they locked in, matching each other's intensity and driving each other to a fever pitch. That feeling of expanding the possibility of a song with his playing pointed the way forward for Duane. His fierce solo on the end of that cut was the true beginning of his career. Everyone who heard it wanted to know who he was. It opened doors for him. The sessions came one after the other after that. Arthur Connolly, King Curtis, Soul Survivors, Otis Rush, and on, and that was just the first month. Fame Studios ran like a top, clean and even, tight and satisfying. The session players worked regular hours, arriving in the morning ready to work, and leaving in the evenings, going home to their families. Then Duane blazes through the place restless and road-worn. Working a routine schedule wasn't in his nature or his experience. He wanted to jump into sessions, add his own touch, and leave.